we should be good, sir.
Well, let's go ahead and call this meeting to order at 4:31 p.m. On May 17th. May we have a roll call, Mr. Russell?
Yes, Councilmember Lau,
Present.
Councilmember Carter,
Present.
Councilmember Crosby,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Davis,
Present.
Mayor Hepburn.
Here.
Thank you.
Item number 3, City Council will meet for a study session on the preliminary budget for fiscal year 2021-22 and on the capital improvement programs. Mr. Russi?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and before I get started, Chair, I'm going to ask you real quickly, do we have the dual stream, the high def and the low definition out there now?
Correct. Yeah. For those watching at home, if there is any trouble with buffering issues, we've actually added an additional feature where if you go down and click on the high def, the HD button, you should be able to change your resolution.
What we have found, remember when we've got complaints about there being problems and gaps, it's about the quality that was being used. So we had to lower it a little bit. So we have both options there for people. So if you're experiencing buffering issues, we ask you to use that lower resolution one, and that should address the issue. So thank you for those who pointed it out. Yes, Mr. Mayor, as you mentioned, we have 2 pieces to tonight's presentation. We're going to take them in the reverse order of what is listed on the agenda, and that is go with the capital improvement program first. Sean is going to go through that presentation. He's going to lay out what your projects are that are prepared to be funded for the coming year, just as a summary, and then also what are the new projects that we add to the 5th year. As you know, this is a planning document to give us kind of a guide to work for and prepare and to help fund the projects over the next 5 years. So the stuff in the middle has already been discussed, but it's really the stuff on both ends that is a lot more relevant. So with that, and then in both of these presentations, after we're done, we're really not looking for formal action from the council, just for direction and consensus that we are okay to bring these forward for final approval. The budget and the CIP will both be are scheduled for your June 21st meeting for final approval. Okay, so with that, Sean.
Perfect. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. So this afternoon, I'll be going over what our CIP looks like for this current year and then the next 5 years. And as many of you know, the purpose of this program is really to identify specific projects for the community that meet the needs of items such as the general plan, specific plan, and master plans. The CIP is really a tool that allows us to coordinate internally within our departments with other agencies like Pomona, Claremont, things like that, and also other utilities such as SCE or the gas company, so that we don't duplicate our work and we don't have streets being dug up within a short period of time being redone. Finally, it allows us to have a strong financial plan to ensure we identify funding sources so we can continue to do programs throughout the years. So with that, do we have the PowerPoint up available?
It's the whole thing. Yeah. So if okay. Can you all see that?
No.
No.
I see you guys. I see everybody else.
So we need to get a share screen here.
There we go.
Now hit full screen. Should hit up hot. Okay. All right. Now scroll back up. I think we're next slide.
Perfect. All right. So as you can see, as of today, as of 2013 to today, we've delivered about $28 million in projects since this program was put together, which is definitely a great endeavor by many parties and many people. In the coming fiscal year, we have another $6.9 million that will be directed to 16 fully funded projects and other improvements. For the 5-year outlook, we have another 41 projects in totality, which will be equating out to $39.2 million for the next 5 years. And then with that, even with our general fund contributions and other, contributions to water fund, things like that, only about 2/3 of these projects are funded. Keep in mind that the other third of that is really through grants and other items that we haven't secured those funds yet, but we do have, we are working on getting those grant funds. Next slide, please. So in the 2020-21 capital improvement program year, 17 of the 25 funded projects were completed. Some of them are kind of being finalized over the next month or so, but we will have a total of 17 completed by the end of the fiscal year. Out of that, 8 projects will be carried forward into the next fiscal year. 5 projects will be reprogrammed into other fiscal years, which really allows us to balance not only the funding availability, but also staff workload to ensure that we're not overworking our staff and that we can actually facilitate these projects being completed. For the 2021-22 CIP list, we have 16 projects that, as I said, were 100% fully funded, pending grant approval. So we do have one that we are waiting on grant approval, and that's for about $275,000. Next slide. So this slide gives us an overview of what this next year CIP looks like out of the $6.9 million. As many of you know, the pavement management program, equipment replacement program, water line repairs, sewer line repairs, those are all ongoing programs that we have to meet the needs of our infrastructure. And then after that, we get into really what are they call them one-off projects, such as traffic signal, our MPDS implementation, which really goes into capturing stormwater that comes off into our infrastructure. We have our Plateau Summit water line replacement, Monero Square stage, and the list goes on. So we do have several projects that we do have in the queue. I want to point out at the bottom there, the Arrow Highway Urban Greening Grant. That grant was secured thanks to Anthony. So we're definitely looking forward to getting that project in place. Next slide, please.
If I may, Sean, that project is also in partnership with the city of Pomona. So we did a co-grant. We assured that with council that we got that award a couple months ago. There will be a contribution amount, I'll call it, by both parties in addition to the grant to help complete the project, but a significant amount of the project will be funded by the grant. So compliments to everybody.
Perfect. So for our 5-year outlook, as I mentioned, we have 41 projects programmed through 2026-27 with a total value of $39.2 million, which are financed over 23 funding sources. This really equates out to various funds such as restricted funds from the water fund, sewer fund, unrestricted to general fund, and then we have items such as the gas tax, Measure R, Measure M, items such as that. So for the last of the 5 years, that new project list, the 6 new projects requested for 2026-27 include replacement of 2 air conditioning units at Fire Station 2, Coons Park and Live Oak bathroom updates, pressure reducing valve for our water system, and then 3rd Street water line replacement and Veterans Hall kitchen upgrades. The CIP continues to rely heavily on grant funds. As I mentioned, about 1/3 of that is relying on grant funds, the general fund, and then also the Parks Development Fund. Currently, our 5-year outlook, we're anticipating about a $1 million shortfall in the general capital improvement fund, which it basically equates out to just a couple of projects not being completed. Next, thank you. So again, as I mentioned, to wrap things up, as I mentioned, for this current fiscal year, we are 100% funded, which is great. And then moving forward, we do have some contribution issues we have to look at. So per decisions that we've been looking at over the past several years, we're hoping to get another $250,000 from the general fund to really help augment some of the deficiencies that we have in our funding sources. And again, we rely heavily on grant funding. This equates out to the $14.7 million that we're looking at over the course of the 5 years. And then our general fund, as I mentioned, because of that lack of funding for the $1 million, we're looking at about 6 projects not being completed over the next 5 years. Again, we could have funding and grant opportunities where we could get these funded, but as of right now, the funding sources that we have outlined, we're going to be short about 6 projects. And then finally, the general fund does support community-wide enhancements, while other sources typically support specific operational functions, such as water line replacements, sewer line replacements, sewer system upgrades, things of that nature. And that's all that I have.
Thank you, Sean. And I'll open it up to council questions in a minute, but I do want to point back to that second bullet and the assumptions that were made in putting the CIP together. And you'll see it in my presentation. The general fund contribution, because of the deficit that we at least have at this point, does not allow for the contribution to be made in this next year coming up. However, in anticipation, based on the direction council gave previously as it relates to the sale of Amherst, I felt that we could forego that at least in the current year and still be able to replenish what we were short. So you'll see that as part of my presentation, but something that we can certainly get further direction as we move forward with council. So,
Council, do we have questions for Director Igo? Comments?
Nope.
Anybody there? No?
No.
any questions about the projects that we're adding?
No, this is Muir. I guess I just want to reiterate that the annual funding that the general fund has been making towards the capital improvement plan has only been $250,000 a year, but it was interrupted the last year and this year because of COVID.
Actually, it was interrupted, if I may, a couple years before that as part of the fiscal sustainability plan as well.
Right. Thank you for taking us further back. Yeah. So it's a program that we occasionally interrupt, but in order to maintain safe streets and well-funded streets, we want to make sure we keep this program going. So thank you.
Councilmember Crosby.
Yeah, and looking at some of the projects for the 21-22 year, the project number, the first number is like for the traffic signal on Wheeler South, that was proposed to be done in 2015, correct? That it starts 1502. And so if we look at those, the projects for next year, there are quite a few projects that have been rolled over from years past that we're trying to complete this year. So they're not all just this year. I really appreciate, Sean, I haven't got to speak with you one-on-one. I really appreciate speaking with Dan last year and going through and how him and now you develop the plan, really forward thinking rather than what just comes up. You have your emergencies, those are always going to have, and you're going to have that in place, but really forward thinking and budgetary over the next 5 years and trying to plan those out, and appreciate that. And looking at today's proposal, you have over half of them are trying to get ones from the years past because things happen as well. But appreciate the well planning out for the plans.
Any other questions from council? Councilmember Lau, Councilmember Carter? No? I'll reiterate with that, Mr. Igo, welcome to our team here. And this is extremely important, as Councilmember Davis stated. We did when we were, before they came on, there was some times when it got a little tough, but it's so important to keep these capital improvement projects going because they really do keep our community neat, clean, safer. I did have and thank you for all the staff. I know this is a lot of work. It's not an easy thing to put together. It takes time, it takes resources, but we must stay diligent on this and try to keep the money in there as much as we can. I did have a question. I know that when Director Kesey was in, we were talking, one of the deals was that many years ago, we have a lot of alleys in Laverne, and they were unpaved, and most of them are paved now. Do we have anything in that budget, on the pavement budget, for look at some of the ones that are in pretty bad shape to do some type of pavement management on those?
I'd have to look at the program to see if we do have those. I know typically what we end up doing is if we do have some funding that's available while a project is going on and we think we're going to finish under budget, sometimes we will look at other areas to incorporate into that because we have the funding available. So we can look at that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I can tell you at least at this moment, just from a line item, Mr. Mayor, I do not see that we have anything in the 5-year that has been programmed specifically for that.
I didn't see it, but I know that we talked about it. And it's something we need to think about because they are streets. Some of them are streets, you know.
Yep.
So it's something we want to keep up. Okay. No further questions for Mr. Igo. Thank you, Mr. Igo.
Thank you.
Mr. Russi,
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
you're going to go on the next one. We're not going to go. Is there any public comment? I don't think we had any on this
We
issue.
might have any
correct?
requests for the CIP, but we can stop and see if there was any public comment on just the CIP at this point.
If we could, just to check.
And Mr. Mayor, we do have somebody raising their hand. So I'll go ahead and make them a panelist with your permission.
Yes, please.
It looks like he's in the room. It's Mr. Bowen. It
Yeah,
looks like he's
Can
in-
we take off, I'm sorry to stop you, Jack. Can we take off the,
Study session.
everybody that we can see everyone's faces, please?
There we go. Okay.
There we go. Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Bowen.
Hey, good evening, Mayor and Council. Hey, one quick question. You went through the slides at the very beginning. They showed a $200,000 safety security fence. I'm kind of curious, what are we going to spend $200,000 on for a safety security fence?
No, you have that one you want me to answer?
I can answer that one. Yeah. So this is at our public safety facility. And so it's an extension of the current block wall that they have to allow for not only additional vehicle security, but also security of the staff that's there. So that's what that amount is intended for, is not only to expand on that wall, but also to build it up higher. Because as many of us know, it is a low wall.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Bowen?
Sorry, I put him back as an attendee after we hear the questions. That's
So is that it, JR? Or are we going to bring him back?
yeah. There's no. I can bring him back if you would like.
I didn't know if that was his only question, but I mean, we could bring him back if he wants to come back in, and then we'll move on. Mr. Bowen, do you have any other questions?
Not on that. There was a lot of information in there, but that one was interesting. Which location? He says, as we know, it's a low wall.
I think Mr. Igo's talking about the PD parking lot there and the area on the, if you look at the back side, the left side of the parking lot of the main house, and then you've got the open area there that's got a block wall with the electric gates for the police cars to come in and out. Is that correct, Mr. Igo?
That's correct.
Yeah, so they're going to expand on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bowen. Okay, Mr. Rush, we'll move to your report. Is that correct?
Yes, I assume that with council's concurrence, we will bring this forward for final the CIP forward for final adoption.
Everybody in concurrence with that? We move forward. Yes? That's okay. Yes.
All right, and now we will move on to the preliminary budget. As council is aware, this is the last 3 months of the year. We have been spending preparing the budget. I'm gonna wait for the presentation. There we go. Okay. And it is done in a very team-oriented. You go to the next slide. Team-oriented approach. I'm not going to go through the first several steps that have been working since February till now, but they've all been involving each of the departments, their requests, their review with finance, as well as the finance team. Not just Christy and Mark, but payroll, accounts payable, everybody's involved. So what you see in this very small amount of time is a lot of work to getting here. So I want to at least compliment everybody, the departments and the finance department for their work in helping us. Because I think you'll see once you get to the presentation, how far we've come in comparison to last year. I'm very proud to be able to present this to the council. So just to show you the timeline, here we are in the middle of May. There are still 4 steps left in the actual adoption of your budget. There will be this input process with the council, and it's really a higher level. I'm just giving you the dollars and the general direction that I see being able to move the budget forward comfortably for approval. I'll ask council for that concurrence, and then we'll come forward with the next putting the books together, which will happen next slide. And the latter part of May, we will get those out to council. Then in the first part of June, you will have your presentations from each of the department heads, where they will have an opportunity to share with you specifics about their requests. Also provide a presentation for the community to understand what their specific requests are. And then at your second meeting in June, the middle of June, that's when the budget will be on there for actual approval. So we have several opportunities for the input and consideration, and then for final adoption by council. So before we go into next year's proposed budget, I wanted to give you a summary of kind of where we are going to close out the current year. Revenues are expected to be just over $35 million, and expenditures are going to be 36.6, almost 36.7, which puts our deficit, next slide, our next piece, there you go, at about 1.3. Now, you remember that you approved a $1.1 million deficit. When we factor in all the carryovers, which are appropriations that were in the prior year that needed to be carried forward, that took the deficit to about 1.3. But even with that, you'll see your projected balance for the end of the year is expected to be $9.3 million from 10.7. And then the final shows a little bit of a history here of how the general fund reserve, and this is just general fund, has kind of ebbed and flowed. But the fact that we have put this money aside, like we talked about last year, for a rainy day has really come beneficial at this point. And I'll share a little bit of news with you when we get further in, but we're going to be able to replenish some of this over the next year. So with that, I just want to give you a little bit of beyond the numbers and give you that the revenue projections that we gave you at mid-year are still holding as we expected. We told you we would give you updates throughout. There is no significant changes to the numbers that Mark presented to you back in February, and then again, or January, and then again in February. So we still see those numbers as holding strong as we requested. No deviations up, significant deviations up or down. The numbers that you saw and the deficit on the prior page presume the use of $860,000 for the salary increases that went into effect January of last year. Using the Measure LV money. So that really helped to bridge that gap to keep us competitive within the market. The numbers that are presented, the expenses of the 36 million, also include all of our COVID-related expenses related to COVID response. So we have not separated those out. They're all absorbed in your budget within that general fund numbers. What is not included in there is, if you'll remember back to the middle part of last year, maybe September or so, the state gave each city a certain amount of money, and we received just over 400,000. We've been holding those funds aside. We have not earmarked them or dedicated them for anything at this point. They certainly can go back to replenish part of that 1.3 million that has been used in your reserves. And then the other piece is we are still going through the application process, which is an extremely extensive process for FEMA reimbursement, since we had declared a state of emergency, which allows us to go after federal funding for a portion of the eligible expenses. And we will be pursuing anywhere between $500,000 to $750,000 in requests. But it will be predicated on what the feds determine to be eligible expenses under those, the backup that we submit with that. And Christy has the pleasure of working through that maze with them. So I thank her for taking that on. So the bottom line is where we have the use of about 1.3, we do have 400,000 and hopefully anywhere up to $500,000 to $750,000. So that we will be able to replenish almost all of the reserves that we have used to this point. So before I jump into next year's budget, I just want to stop and see if there are any questions council has as it relates to the current year.
Any questions for Mr. Russi, council? No, I see none.
No.
Mr. Russi, what was that number again? I apologize. What are we looking at as far as the CARES funds and the COVID related expenses? What are we looking at? What was that number?
The CARES funds was about 400,000, just a little over that.
Okay.
And the FEMA, again, we are going to request roughly 500 to $750,000. We just don't know what they're necessarily going to approve.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
No other questions? Well, you can move on, sir.
Okay. So this takes again, a brief snapshot of what the current year is looking like. Revenues are going to be roughly 38, expenditures 39. The actual deficit is about $560,000. When we first started going through the department meetings and reviewing requests and evaluating what could be supported, we started at about 1.7. We were able to work collaboratively with the departments to work on getting those numbers down, maybe shifting some things off, prioritizing. So we have the actual deficit about 560,000. Of that number, 460 is one-time expenditures. So there are either capital requests or items that are necessary to improve our technology aspects in the police department, but they're one time and not reoccurring. So your reoccurring deficit at this point is just over $100,000. So I feel pretty confident in being able to say, considering the one time we have almost over $500,000 of deficit, but a majority of that is for one-time expenses that you'll get more detail from the departments as we go forward in their presentation. So I'll go through some highlights of some things that are folded into the budget so you can get a flavor of what's been incorporated. And with that, unless there are questions on the deficit or concerns with what is seen here, I will move on to the next slide.
Any other questions for Mr. Russi? Or should we move on? Looks like we're moving on. Mr. Davis, Councilmember Davis.
Thank you, Mayor. So last year, I know maybe it's just not a very fair comparison, but last year we were looking at a projected deficit of about $1 million. I'm trying to get my arms around, was all that recurring or was some of that? I think that was all recurring, right? So essentially what we're saying is going into this year, our projected recurring deficit is 1/10 of what we anticipated experiencing last year. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, and you'll remember a lot of that was due to our real conservative look at the revenue. So that reoccurring deficit was really large because we had no way to predict what that future would look like. And then that picture got better and better as the year went on, as we report.
Right. So, and the reason I wanted to frame it that way is that, from a preliminary budget perspective, 103,000 recurring deficit appears to me to be a manageable number, not out of control. So I just wanted to make sure I understood that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Davis. And I will say that number of items, property tax, sales tax, much better than we anticipated. Am I not correct, Mr. Russi? A lot of
Yes,
us-
probably sales tax more than anything else. Property tax was better, but we weren't as concerned about that, I'd say, when we were preparing the budget, because we didn't see that having an effect. But sales tax definitely was. But that came back a lot stronger than we had expected. So that was a key piece. We were almost on par with what a normal year would have looked like, not counting the growth.
Much better than anticipated. Councilmember Lau, you had a question?
That I missed a little bit of that. My question was to clarify that point. I think is that was brought up. Is it better than projected in pandemic times, or better than projected had it been a normal year? I just want to make sure that I'm understanding the.
It's not better than projected in a normal year, but it's better than what we had, certainly better than what we anticipated going into a pandemic. So
Okay.
it was closer to what a normal year would have looked like without the growth. So, but we were all the way down here when we did our projection, so it was significantly better
Okay.
than what we started the year out predicting.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate
Thank
the
you.
clarification.
Question, sir.
Councilmember Crosby.
With your requested appropriation for one-time expenditures, do you have like the CIP with the 5-year plan with different expenditures coming out, or are these just unanticipated expenditures prior and being one time? With the CIP, we have the 5-year plan. I know Mr. Kesey was developing that throughout his career, and just didn't know about that for these expenditures here.
Most of these are what would be constituted as capital outlay, so they're not considered as part of a project as much as something that wasn't necessarily anticipated to be folded into this or couldn't wait the 5 years, and so it gets incorporated into your operational budget, not into a 5-year planning document. Let's see, I'm trying to come up with an example of one of them. I do not have the specific list of them. Can you guys recall?
Yeah, so these are going to be a little different and more closely tied to the operations. So that's why departments really don't kind of look at these going out 5 years and say, I'm going to need this, because it's more of, as operations are evolving, then one-time purchases come up to fit the operations. Whereas the CIP is more of the bigger projects that they know we've got to do this and handle this. So that's why these don't really fall into that plan of kind of looking out long term. They're definitely more a one year, maybe 2 years out. If we would be doing a 2-year budget, then some of these would be earmarked in year 2. A department may be saying, I know I'm going to need this in year 2 because I know it's coming around the corner. But these are definitely more short-term, one-time purchases related specifically to their operations.
Is that more like software, things like that, software programs, things and servers,
No,
things like that part?
I would normally say yes, but you'll see in
Okay.
my
Moving
presentation,
Okay.
that model has changed significantly. So unfortunately,
It would be like the purchase of a license plate reader.
Oh.
So you're purchasing a piece of equipment that isn't necessarily related to a capital improvement program, because maybe it's $30,000, but it's not a reoccurring expense. It's going to be, you're purchasing the ALPR maybe once every 5 years. So it's those type of one-time purchases
Okay,
that aren't part of the regular operational budget.
thank you. Okay,
But a key for us is to recognize that this one-time expenditures of 460,000 isn't also represented in the CIP. This is independent
this is
of
totally,
the CIP.
correct.
Okay,
And you
thank you.
will get a list of that once all the documents come out. You will see them all listed out individually, and you'll be able to see what exactly each one of those items is.
Thank you.
thank you very much. Any other questions for staff? Okay, we move forward.
So just some notable highlights, and I've got this broken into revenue, personnel, and then other operating. So on the revenue side, there really was no projected growth, significant projected growth over where we expect the current year to end. And part of the reason for that is, you'll recall, Mark had shared that this whole shift in the Amazon distribution of those sales tax dollars could have an effect on our revenues going forward. So we held it at a baseline. So we're not quite sure of the effect. So this is taking more of a conservative approach on that for the time being. So that number is better than it was last year, probably more in line with what we are seeing to end the current year as far as sales tax. Other significant revenues, the building permit activity, it anticipates 3 projects occurring this year. So it is higher than it was last year, because as you know, we didn't have a lot of larger development projects, and these are housing projects that would be taken on. It anticipates Amherst, part of possibly the Fruit project, the project on Fruit Street, and then the one further down on White, down by First Street. As far as other major revenues, and I'm going to capture recreation programs in the category and just a large net, with the exception of those, which we are anticipating a much smaller program offering over the next year, as we still try and figure out where we are going to be relative to restrictions in classes and indoor versus outdoor, which seems to be a lot more positive than when we put the budget together. All others, which is utility tax, property tax, VLF, are near their historic levels. So which means that those revenues are holding pretty well in light of what the last year pandemic we have experienced. As far as personnel, what's included in this budget is this allows for the reorganization of administration and community services, as what has been previously discussed with council, as far as in anticipation of the retirement of the community services director, as well as the retirement of the assistant city manager. There are some changes that are being incorporated in the budget. It adds 1 police sergeant position. And if you remember, this goes back probably just about a year ago, maybe a little bit longer, when we contracted out jail services. There was a significant savings that was resulting from that. The department let council know that they wanted to evaluate how best to reprogram that to be of effect to their operation. And it was the addition of the police sergeant that was determined to be the best way. And they're putting that in the budget for this year. There will also be a savings on the overtime side as a result of this add. So it'll still be a net increase, but it'll be less than the cost of a full body. This also anticipates full funding of the market increases coming from Measure LB, none of it as allowed for under the tax measure, the new revenue coming in from that, and none of that being absorbed by the rest of the general fund. And this budget also in personnel, as it relates to police department overtime, we've been able to make use of our asset forfeiture fund for a number of years to support some of that overtime. That fund we have not been replenishing that fund because as we used to in the past, because there's just not the opportunities that there had been. That fund is now at a place where it's about 400,000, give or take. We're not going to be able to lean on it for the amount of overtime as we have in the past, because we will otherwise deplete it a lot quicker. So that means the general fund is picking up more of the operational overtime. It's roughly about 200,000. Is that about right? So about 200,000 of police department overtime is being supported by the general fund budget this coming year that it hadn't in the past. I'll stop there before I move on to the other slide and see if there are any questions here.
Any questions? Councilmember Carter.
Yes, I have 2. One's a comment, one's a question for Mr. Rusty. The last item under personnel, increase of PD overtime. Is the overtime just because of added work, or are we short officers?
Well, it's a number of things. It could be because officers are on vacation, they could have sick, so it's to ensure that we have the minimum staffing that's necessary to patrol the city. And so that is where that comes in. It could be associated to long-term injuries, but it's certainly within those three categories that we generate overtime. If we have special operational needs, we will also have overtime. Like this last year, when we had the demonstrations, we had to go on a 12 on, 12 off shift. That required a lot of overtime to support that. So that we had to take that on within our operating budget.
Okay. And the other item, I just want to make a comment under revenues. Even though it's listed for anyone that's reading it, it doesn't sound as enticing as what the program was, but for the recreation programs, because we've been limited with COVID, I really want to give kudos to them. They have been creative throughout the year, trying to find ways to enhance any programs they had, whether it was craft programs giving to kids, the seniors that they could do at home. And then obviously our drive-throughs to celebrate with children and families. So I really respect all the hard work they've come up with. And under the leadership of Yvonne, you know, her creativity has been amazing.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff, council?
Yes,
Councilman Davis.
I think Councilmember Carter brought up the good question, and I just want to make sure, so I'm going to rephrase it a little bit, because that last bullet isn't suggesting that PD overtime is increasing. It's simply that PD overtime, as it is, whether it's larger, smaller, or the same, is going to be increasingly supported by the general fund versus the asset forfeiture accounting category. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And I'll join Robin in the accolades to the recreation programs. And I know that there are many people who are interested in as many recreation programs as are safely promoted. I know our residents are ready, willing, and prepared to engage. So hopefully that does happen in a safe manner as soon as possible. Thank you.
I'll put a little plug out there because they're taking registration now for preschool. Swim lessons is gearing up. So they are starting where they can. They are starting programs. So there will be more to come.
Well, and on that half, I'm gonna jump in here. It's just what they've done is amazing with the time and the internet and online, all the stuff and the games and the things that they've done has been amazing. So thank you to everyone. Any other questions for staff? We move forward, Mr. Russi.
Thank you. So the other section is operational and capital. And the first bullet here does connect into the capital, the CIP budget, where we were talking about equipment. And you will see that those vehicles there, with the exception of the 2 engines, because we do not put them in the CIP, they're funded differently. The remainder of those, so those 15 vehicles are being funded through your capital, through your equipment replacement. So a significant number, this is more vehicles and equipment than we purchased in 1 year in a long time. But their life cycle has come up. Fortunately, we have a really good depreciation program and have the money set aside to be able to support this. So as you can see, we're purchasing 5 patrol vehicles, a command vehicle for fire, 8 trucks, and a Vector. In addition to that, there are 2 engines that are being supported in this budget as well, between the general fund and restricted funds that are set up for this their purpose. A Type 1, which is about $850,000, and a Type 3. And I'm just going to stop for a second. The Type 3, we're looking at an opportunity, and compliments to Battalion Chief Russell, to find a cost-effective way to purchase this. It's about a $375,000 purchase. He has identified I'll call it a demo, but it's a brand new one. And the beauty about that is it's ready almost immediately versus putting it on order and then getting it a year later. So what we are considering and will be seeking council's support for is doing an internal financing, so borrowing from ourselves rather than leaning on any one fund too much and pay it back over a 5-year period and purchase it sooner rather than, and get it in more into service more immediately. So we are still exploring that, and whether that gets folded into your next year's budget or comes forward a little bit sooner to get paid over the next 5 years, that's something that is another need that they have in the type 3 is more of your wildland apparatus. It's not your in-town structure fire apparatus that they would be using, but it's something that we use quite frequently when it goes out to fires and such. Matter of fact, it's out at, the one we have is out at Palisades right now at that fire.
Would that be, go ahead, Councilmember Crosby?
I think I'm going to ask the same question you were, Mayor. That's
Yep.
the brush truck.
Yep.
Well, yes.
I was going to ask what kind of a discount. I mean, if something that they're giving on a demo, I mean, they run normally around what, $450,000? Is that correct?
A little less than that. I want to say, one, it's about the price difference, which is about a 10 to 20%, if I recall. But it's more importantly, it's about getting it now versus ordering it and having to wait a year to have it built. That is the greater desire and opportunity for it.
But it's the $300,000 range, which is a great discount for us. You're getting a brand new vehicle that's fully outfitted, ready to go.
Yep.
Is that what you're going to ask, Mr. Crosby?
Yes, but also the type. It was a brush truck, the one we have at Palisades that's on there right now. So then that just gets farmed out or sold, or it's non-operable anymore when it's actually at a fire right now.
Well, it's still in service. I mean, it'll probably, I would have to defer to the chief on whether we would put that on a reserve status or we would look to sell it. I honestly don't know what the interest would be from the department at this point.
Any other questions for staff? Go ahead, we can continue, sir.
Okay, so then these next couple, this 200,000, these are things that are within your, I'll call it ongoing budget and things just to keep in mind. So we had to add this last year, about $200,000 in technological subscriptions. And which was a shock to me, but this is Office 365. We have to do the maintenance on our tasers for PD. Most of these are in public safety, and they have all these technologies have gone to a subscription versus you just purchase it, and then when you're ready to purchase the next 5 to 6 years out, then you're doing a larger expenditure. So we have, and it's got a, you've been aware, or it's been shared, the data breaches that have occurred, not just in agencies, but across the country. A lot of the things that are being subscription-based are to give us better protections and firewalls related to some of those things as well. So it's a model that a lot of the companies are going to, and we're just going to have to absorb this part into our ongoing budget. The other thing that's here is we have about $200,000 anticipated in COVID-related efforts that are in the budget, but we've also identified the money that's coming from the federal government that is available for the next 3 years to support that. So it's not, the general fund's not being leaned on for this 200,000, but I just want you to be aware this is included in our budget at this point. And then I already talked about the one-time expenditures, as well as there's no general fund contribution towards the 5-year CIP in the current year. And that was expected to be at $250,000. Obviously that would just increase our deficit, but recognizing that we expect for the sale of the Amherst property to occur sometime over the next 12 months, I felt okay with postponing at least 1 more year and still being able to fund the projects that we have listed at this point. Any questions here?
Any questions for staff? No, we can move on, sir.
Thank you. So just a couple other things real quickly for financial consideration. The first is the American Recovery Act funding. This is the money coming from federal government. We have about 6.5, 6.8, give or take, million that has been designated for the city of Laverne. We are still trying to go through the guidelines of how the money can be used. So I dare to say that there is a plan outlined, but I wanted to put before council, just this is kind of staff's initial blush on some of the things that we would like to proceed with, and some of it's in priority order. First thing is to replenish whatever revenue was lost, which goes back to 2019 as a base year, 2018-19, and then looks forward. And so there's a formula that we're going to look at and reimburse ourselves for any revenue we've lost in any categories, reimburse ourselves for any expenses that we haven't already received funding for. We're going to, as the program allows or the funding allows, do some type of local economy restart benefit, work with the chamber. We've had some preliminary discussions with them. We talked a little bit last year with the chamber on some possibilities, but nothing really got started at that point. Look at some possible direct business assistance, grants, or some other type of loan opportunities that might be available. If we can do residential recovery, we'd like to look at exploring some of those programs. And then lastly, kind of our catch-all for the remainder of the dollars that we have available that we can't use in these others is to take on some water and sewer capital projects. We should be able to exhaust all of the money. The key is all the money needs to be
I
spent
think, did
by.
Bob just freeze?
No. Where did you lose me, Wendy?
No, you've been good with my feed, Bob. I think it's maybe Wendy's.
Okay.
Mine worked well.
The key is we have to spend all the money by December of 2024.
it's 3 years.
Yeah.
So is that 24?
Yeah, so we have to show that we've made whatever we haven't made use of, we'll have to give back. So our goal is to find in these broader categories how we can put that money to use. The only question I have with some of these categories is I've read that if the federal government has stood up a program with some of these that can fit some of these categories, we can't spend it in that same category. We would have to find something else. So those are some of the things that we're still trying to evaluate. Probably we'll have a better idea by the end of summer, midsummer to the end of summer, of how those requirements or restrictions apply. And I'll certainly be sharing that information with council once I have a better idea. The other thing, and I've mentioned it a couple of times just to keep in the back of council's mind, we will be coming back to you as far as the 115 trust as it relates to our unfunded liability and how much of the money from the sale of Amherst to direct into the 115 trust, as was previously identified by council through the fiscal sustainability plan as being a priority. And then repayment or replenishment, I should have put, of our capital improvement plan for the balance of that. And then the last is to keep in mind that we have June 1st, we have our meeting with the oversight board to go over the estimates of where this year is going to end, as well as our projections for how next year's money is expected to be spent from Measure LV, and give them a report at that time. With that, I will come back to throw it back to the council and see if there are other questions or get whatever your next steps are.
Councilmember Lau.
So if we go back to the last slide, please. So for the American Recovery Act, I just want to be clear, are the parameters already set, or is that an ongoing endeavor to try to figure out what that money can be used for? Or is it, and when I say if the language or the parameters are already set, is it an issue of trying to wade through the language? Because I know those can be pretty lengthy in terms of what the restrictions are.
So it's a little bit of both. We've seen the preliminary, I'll call it rulemaking, but that's not the right word, but correct, what's that? Guidelines.
Mhm.
And it is 80 pages.
At least.
So, and even trying to read through, probably the easiest one I saw was the calculation on how to reimburse yourself for revenue, because it was, you could actually follow that, but everything else, I was kind of looking at it going, yeah, I'm not quite sure what this means at this point. So there's going to be a lot of discussion. The Department of Treasury is scheduling webinars, and the League of California Cities is also evaluating it to give us guidance. It's just going to take us a little bit of time to kind of sift through and say what's going to be acceptable and what isn't.
Okay, thank you.
The other thing is that we're not getting the funds directly from the federal government. Because our population is under 50,000, we are getting funds from the state. And so we are waiting on guidelines from the state as well to see what we need to do. The other thing, and we have a preliminary amount that we're expecting to get. That amount could change. We have not received the set amount because again, it is coming from the state. So the state will receive amount, and then they're going to distribute that based on our population, from what I understand.
So in addition to the federal guidelines, there will be state guidelines that will have to be further interpreted and before we can spend the money.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Russi or staff?
I have a question for Christy to expand on what you just said. So the federal, because we're under 50,000 in population, we will not get directly federal funding reimbursement. It'll go to the state, and the state would determine what the population, how much we get.
They're not they're not determining it. They're going to distribute those funds based on our population. So we're still waiting to see what the calculation is going to be. The way I understand it, in limited experience, because we just got this information, is the state is going to get a set amount of money. That amount has to be distributed to the agencies that are under 50,000 population. So
Okay.
from what I'm seeing, the calculations are changing a little bit, but we'll see what happens when the state comes out with their guidance.
Okay, thank you, Christy.
Any other questions for staff or Mr. Russi? No. I want to thank staff, especially Mr. Alvarado and also Christy and Mr. Russi. It's a lot of work. A lot of work, a lot of numbers. We do appreciate it. I know all of us do. It's very important to run a tight ship. Being that said, Mr. Russi, do you have anything else?
I do not. I just looking for direction from council. I know that you had a couple of members of the public that did want to speak on this matter. So, and the only thing I would look for, again, as a reminder, is not an action, but just direction.
They want to speak on this budget here, or I was going to make a proposal. Should I do that now?
Whichever, but I think it'd be appropriate to do it now.
Then, as everybody's probably heard on the social media, that I have put together a plan to start a rebuilding process for our fire department, which in essence, it involves one, opening up Station 3 as an engine company, which would be captain, engineer, firefighter, paramedic. Station 3 would stay the same, captain, firefighter, paramedic. So, and then Station 1 would be the ladder truck, which would be a 4-person crew, because we would have to move an engine up to Station 3. And then also we already have the ambulance crew. This particular cost would be $1.2 to $1.5 million. And now I know everybody's asking how we're going to fund that. There's been many issues before we funded it through used our reserve funds. Also, the fact that we do have some other funds that are becoming available. I know some of them are earmarked. This is a one-time for this 2022. I think we need to get our fire department back on its feet, bring the pride back to the fire department. It also gives us a ring of coverage, not just firefighting, but really for the calls and the times that it takes to get to a resident. And this is very important. We have 3 stations, but also the biggest thing, we've had nothing but retention issues. I know that the employee groups have had problems trying to keep people on, and really let them know that we do care about our employee groups. As we do our other employee groups, we fund them. We try to keep everyone at a median salary. We try to keep our benefits good, our retirement's good. It's important that we show some caring to our fire department, and in essence, to put them back and right the ship. put them back. I know that there's money to be taken out of the, if we use reserve funds and also our other funds that become available. We have to look for a sustainable source down the road, obviously. And I know that the people have said, well, wait till the fire chief gets there. This tool will give the fire chief already set in place 2 additional personnel in the budget that he can start working on. And I'm actually following almost to the letter the Messina report that we've all had, that we all went through. On page 27, it's a modification of the staffing of 13, which had to do with ambulance and things like that. But I feel that we need engineers and firefighter paramedics, which we have, most of our people in the city are paramedics, except I think 1 engineer. So being that said, I'd like to get council support. I would like to get to push this forward, to give Mr. Russi the edict to go ahead and start this process. I think it's a good thing to do. I think that once we rebuild this, I know we have not had our fire study from the LA County. That's really not a concern right now. If that comes down the road 2 or 3 years, that's up to the residents, as we've stated, to vote on whether we keep private or not, or we go county. I think it's very important. We got a great fire department. We got a lot of great employees. I think this is the time for us to basically fund this mechanism to get more personnel on it. And this plan just didn't come from me. We were all invited by the association to meet with them regarding the situation, what's going on in the fire department. And after that meeting, discussion was, ask what's going to make this right? What's going to right this ship? And in that turn, I talked to Robert Russell, BC Russell, Danny Montoya, and Kevin Greenway, also previous Chief Segura, and also the association. And this has been, they said this would work. This will work. Segura said it would work. So the plan is to, as I stated, I know we have to dip into our reserves or we use one-time funds, but we do have to find a sustainable source. I am not discounting that at all. We have to fund this fire department. We've had 100+ years of a fire department that over the last 4 years has experienced a lot of negative issues. And I won't go into details because we all know what happened. It's beyond us now. There was a settlement, but we need to move forward and right this ship. So that's my plan. I'd like support from council. Questions?
Would council like to take public comment?
You'll take public comment first, everyone?
Well, I guess I'm concerned that your reliance on one-time funds or reserve funds is reckless. You'd said it the other day on your minute with the mayor that the #1 item is funding. And I think we've gone through sustainability exercises. We've gone through refinancing exercises to make sure that our obligations can be met with revenue. And I feel you're being reckless by going out and saying, here, I'm spending money, but we don't have the resources for it. So I was hoping that your plan was going to be focused solely around funding and finding out how we're going to make or generate an additional $1.5 million to fund whatever the fire chief would propose that we do. So I'm concerned that your proposal is reckless and lacks the money where you hope the plan would be.
Well, if reckless is keeping our community safe and our employees, then I guess I'm reckless. We've dipped into our funds before, Councilmember Davis. This isn't the first time. This is an employee group that's been basically challenged over the last 4 years. And believe me, both sides not perfect. But at the end of the day, just like our other employee groups in our general fund, we're putting in dollars for that. Yes, we have to approach it with a one-time to use our reserves, or we use monies that we just became available. Not reckless. It's the safety of our residents and the safety of our fire personnel that's the most important thing. And quite frankly, I'm tired of it. This has been going on for way too long. We just keep kicking the can down the road. We've got a fire station that's been out of commission for over a year. And that thing needs to be opened back up. And yes, it was an ambulance station. It is a fire station. That's what it needs to be. In order to give our ring of coverage for this community, we will also, for automatic aid to our outsourced in LA County, we'll be able to help them too. And the last survey was 10-to-1 ratio. LA County gave us support 10 times, we gave them 1. And not only that, it brings the pride back to our community, it brings the pride back to our employees. And not only that, we'll be able to hire people from outside for reciprocal roles that can move from other fire departments, know that we're rebuilding. And yes, we have to get a fire chief, the most important thing, which we're working on right now. We have to give him some tools before we just drop this whole thing in his lap and we keep kicking the can down the road for 2 or 3 years more. Reckless? No. Safety? Yes. I don't put money over safety. I never have. And I'm very serious about that. I'm one of the council members that started a lot of these things that we did now when it came to employee groups with the CalPERS and also selling of properties because of the fact of assets and how much we spend to be very cautious. And our finance department does an absolutely fabulous job keeping us straight and going through the nuances of what's going on in costs and employees, our employee groups. And the most important thing our employee groups is keeping them, first of all, with a good wage, with good benefits, great retirement, and an absolutely good working environment so that we keep and retain our employees. Reckless, no. Safety, yes. Councilmember Carter.
Hey, Tim, why don't we do public comment first and then we can, talk about this. So let's hear what the public has to say.
Council, you want to go to public comment? Are you okay with that? JR, we're going to go to public comment, please. We have people on the line.
And Mr. Mayor, just mentioned to those that are participating via Zoom, I see that we do have a couple already have their hands up. If you would wish to speak on this item, please raise your hand. And then once we go through the Zoom attendees, then we will move to, we do have some people that would like to call in. So we'll move to those second. So. And it looks like the first person I bring in is Jackson Salinas.
Good evening, Mr. Salinas. You're on mute.
Good evening. I 100% Mayor Hepburn's proposal. We need to keep our fire department. We do not want to go county. We definitely need Fire Station 3 back open. Please support his proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Salinas.
And the next person I'm bringing in is Lily Brainerd.
Good evening, Ms. Brainerd.
Hi. So thank you for working on this fire department. I don't know how to change the.
Okay. You know what? It's good.
Okay, hold it. Okay, so I think as a lifetime resident, I'm going to retire in Verne. So I present a lot of residents who is not able to go on Zoom. They don't know how to go on Zoom. This discussion about a fire department is already been like more than 1 year from like the last 2 Christmas. It's not just a city icon. Like we love our own fire department. It's just like a living history. It's a culture thing. But for me, first thing still a safety, because I just simply don't trust LA County. We need to pay anyway. Since our city will have more residents come in because the housing, because you guys will find out how to deal with the finance, okay? But as a resident, I just simply don't trust LA County because California now is messed up. They have so many issues. They need fire department. They will go to somewhere else. They probably should come to Verne. But something else more serious happened in other West Los Angeles, like whatever violent crime, right? Police department, fire department, they all go together. They will forget us. Verne is a very peaceful, safe county. They may feel like you guys is fine, but it's not fine. Something happened yesterday. 3 girls missing, from Glendora. Figures out, 1,000 shares. We talk about social media. They still say Verne no longer be a safe city. It's very much concerned. So fire department has to really stand by. I mean, not just in our mind, just like policeman department, fire department, always together, right? So what I concern is most is safety things. We have so many things to think about. Our city is very unique, very unique. So this is our culture. So you never know, fire department, not just the icon in Christmas for like 70 years, more than 70 years. It's about the safety for all Laverne residents. We are very charming small city, but keep in our fire department is our goal. Because I talked to so many residents, we talk about why we couldn't keep our fire department. So we saw the news is going to open station 3. So everybody excited. We say it's already make it. Actually, we still stuck here for the budget, right? So please listen to our voice. I present pretty much a similar resident like me. We plan to live in Laverne lifetime, okay? So please keep the fire department our own. Laverne Fire Department is very cool, okay? It's a very valuable. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to remind you that we do have our meeting at 6:30, so you may want to regulate time a little bit so you council has time to discuss.
Okay, well, we'll probably keep it to 3 minutes then if we could, please. Hello, Ms. Gabaldon.
Good afternoon, everybody. I just wanted to make sure everybody thought about these bigger picture things. I'm hearing the word sustainable source, but I also watch that we're at $1.5 million deficit per year. Sustainable and deficits do not balance out. I'm also hearing about the use of the selling of the Amherst project as this great Band-Aid to the city budget, and not once do any of you bring up the impacts to the city and to our neighborhood and to the people in this neighborhood, the safety impacts and the degradation of our life on the street. You're using us again. 3, money over safety. What about the safety of our neighborhoods when it comes down to this? You brought up the 3 sites, Brandywine, Amherst, and then the site down there on White. What about the golf course? Is this the new MO? When it comes to needing money, you're going to start selling out more of our neighborhoods. And lastly, the one thing I haven't heard yet, the other item I did here was that you're talking about all of the employee groups, and I get it. Staff is important. Not once during this entire 40 hour or so now, not once did you guys talk about the residents. Our taxes pay for all of this. It's our money. Our taxes are going up this year again. Our fees for the waste are going to go up. Measure LV was sold to pay for fire and PD because I went and dug out all the old flyers. Why are we even talking about all this? I thought Measure LV was going for all of our public services. And instead I'm seeing it's being used as a slush fund for a whole bunch of other projects. It's our money. It's our money. The residents, I want to hear the word resident used more in all this. Thank you. And hopefully you guys don't increase any taxes.
Thank you, Ms. Gabaldon. I appreciate your comments. JR?
Just making sure that there's not any other hands. Here we go. We've got one more. So I'll bring Pam Beery into the room.
Good evening, Ms. Berry. There you go.
Okay, sorry. It's got like disappeared for a minute. I'm like, where'd the window go? Okay. All right. So we've attended a lot of council meetings over the past 4 to 5 years. A bunch of us have, and we really miss being in there. We would be in there tonight for sure. There have been a lot of safety concerns. We saw no council action. I was actually appalled to kind of see the crickets after the mayor made the proposal. It just shocks me because I know that every council member went and met with the fire association and agreed there's a need for safety. And the Messina report indicated that something had to be done. So I don't know why we're not here this afternoon reviewing an urgent all council joint plan to save the Laverne Fire Department versus just the mayor coming up with a plan and having everybody sit there with their mouths hanging open like, well, I don't know what the problem is. I don't know. It's just, I'm really disappointed. I'm very disappointed. Capital improvement is second to safety. That's how family budgets work. We deal with what's important first. and actual city function is more important than capital improvements. So overtime is costing way more than salaries. So I think being in a situation where we have very few firefighters and everybody's doing overtime and exhausted, we're not as safe. So what's reckless? Really, what's reckless? You all got an email from me. I am in support of the plan. If all of you said over and over again that you want to keep our fire department, you can't just keep it as it is. It can't stay as it is. It's broken. It's not sustainable. So safety comes first. If you want to keep it, you got to fix it. And that's the bottom line. I would really like to see all of you come together and do what's right. And that's what I got to say.
Thank you, Ms. Berry. JR?
Not seeing any other hands up, I'll go to phone call. Just give me one moment, please. Mr. Mayor, I have Kathy Newland on the line. Go ahead, Kathy.
Good evening, Ms. Newland.
Hello, Mayor Hepburn and City Council. I'm calling in tonight to ask that this council put the safety of our residents first and foremost in the decision to fund whatever is necessary to make our Laverne Fire Department full again. It's time to make the rebuilding of our fire department a top priority. We have a safe city, or to have a safe city for our residents means our fire department employees must first have what they need to protect us. Equipment must be up to the standards and updated if needed. From what I have observed over the past 4 years is a decline in the accountability of our city manager and council in making decisions based on what is right for our residents. It seems that each of the council members want to keep the city services rather than to go with the county services. Councilwoman Carter was involved in sending out a petition for the people of Laverne to sign if they wanted to keep our Laverne Fire Department, and of course received many signatures. Of course we all want this. However, this petition did not explain what the cost to keep our own fire department would be. It led the residents to think that it was a very simple choice, city or county, but it involves much more than this. It will need funding. It will need our council members to vote yes on that funding. We as a city were let down over the past 4 years due to poor decisions. These decisions have led to the decline of our fire department, trust in our city manager, as well as our council members, and division in our residents. If the better decisions had been made 4 years ago, our city would not have been sued. Now it's time to repair the damages and make good decisions. These decisions need to be made without emotional residue, but with the safety of everyone involved. I'm asking each and every council person to put my life, the lives of each of our residents, and each of our firefighters in front of all else. Treat this vote for funding as a choice you would make as if your family's very life depended on it. You wouldn't buy a car without seatbelts or a house without smoke alarms. The price would not make your decision when protecting your family. We need the assurance that each and every one of you, as elected council members, will make these safe decisions for us. We expect you to find the money available to protect your family, the residents, just as you would your immediate family. Our lives are in your votes for funding. All of the restaurants, teen centers, housing developments, etc. won't matter if we cannot feel protected. Please put politics and money over safety. Our lives are depending on your vote. And I have one question. I want to ask if the fire chief, Segura, if he supports Mayor Hepburn's plan. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Ms. Newland. In answer to Kathy Newland's question, yes, Mr. Segura did support my plan.
Chief Segura supported reinstating the paramedics in the ambulance. That was as much as Chief Segura supported, nothing further than that.
He supported my action, like I just told you. I had a conversation with him, and we
I
discussed.
beg to differ with that statement.
When
didn't
was
support-
that conversation?
He did not support the overtime of staffing Station 3 with overtime. He did support the fact of hiring more of individuals and more firefighters.
That's not what he told me. He told me he supported your interest in reestablishing the 2 firefighter paramedics in the ambulance.
What he told me, so. Do we have any other callers? JR?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have several on the line. I have Joe Wetton. Go ahead, Joe.
Good evening, Ms. Wetton.
Mr. Mayor and Council, my name is Joe Wetton and I live in Foothill Terrace. My dad was an engineer on the Los Angeles Fire Department and my brother was captain on San Gabriel Fire Department. So I do know a bit about fire service. As a new resident in Laverne, I found my husband on the floor and unresponsive. So I dialed 911 and the Laverne Fire responded quickly. After checking my husband, I was told that he had passed away. They also explained the rule about calling police. They were unavailable, but the firefighters assured me that they would be with me until the police could arrive. They were very professional, yet very kind. I will do all I can to regard the fire department. You cannot put a price on life. We have all heard about the Messina reports that Laverne paid for. The information must not be ignored, and you cannot put a price on lives with a notebook. We must keep our fire department. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then there'll just be a slight delay now. We've got to move off the ones that we had in the queue and start calling, so please hold. Mr. Mayor, I have Denise Fisher on the line.
Hello, Ms. Fisher. Good evening.
Hi, good evening to all of you. And just listening, I understand the need to put somebody back up at Station 3. I know it was for medical purposes. And as far as I understand, 90+% of all of our calls in Laverne are for medical. I don't think it's, I guess, fiscally appropriate, I guess, to put a whole nother fire station up there when the Wheeler station, should a fire occur, is north enough that they could respond quickly. Also, I know when there is a fire, everybody rolls, whether it's county or Glendora or Claremont fire, everybody rolls to a fire. And you know, I think what we have here, we have all the appropriate types of fire trucks. We have the large hook and ladder. I just saw on the budget, there's 2 more trucks that you guys are going to be purchasing. But I think everybody needs to understand that most of the calls we get here in Laverne are medical. And when we do have a fire, county rolls, and that they come to us, they come for our aid because we are part of LA County, and that is part of what they do. Just as if the PD has a situation where they are in trouble, the LA County Sheriff's roll to assist them. So I don't think opening up a station to add another $1.3 million to our budget is even feasible. We are already working at a deficit. The fire department, yeah, I understand they want it, but as the last several years, that's all I have heard out of the fire department is whining. I have not once heard our police department complaining that they don't have this, they don't have that. They do the work They all walk around and they're friendly. The fire department, that's all I've heard is whining, and I'm just over it. If they don't like working in our city, they need to go find another job. Go work for the county somewhere. Go work for another city fire department. But if they don't like it here, then go find somewhere where they like. We need to have firemen here in our town that love our town just as much as we do and don't create problems all the time. So I, for one, do not agree with your proposal to open up Fire Station 3 fully. Paramedics, yes, not fully. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. JR?
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, we have Andy Glaze on the line.
Mr. Glaze, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Andy Glaze, and I'm the Laverne Firefighter Association President. I'm calling tonight to let you know that the Laverne firefighters 100% support Tim Hepburn's proposal. We have met and spoken with the fire chiefs, battalion chiefs, and we all agree that this is the best plan. Despite what Mayor Davis just stated, Chief Segura did support Mayor Hepburn's proposal. And in fact, he met with Hepburn and his 3 BCs, Greenway, Montoya, and Russell, and they all agreed on the proposal. That was in a group meeting, so there's plenty of evidence and plenty of support, and you can talk to any of the BCs about that if you don't believe it. The Laverne firefighters met with all the council members as well in the past month, and all of you agreed that we had to do something to fix the department. You all agreed that status quo was unacceptable and that you needed to do something. This is your opportunity to do the correct thing and reopen Fire Station 3 with a paramedic engine and staff the fire truck. Please put safety before politics. Thank you to Tim Hepburn for your proposal to save the Laverne Fire Department. Reckless, no. Safety, yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Glaze.
Mr. Mayor, we have at least 2 more, I believe.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry about that. We're having trouble bringing on our next person. Hold on one second. Mr. Mayor, I have Fred Fott on the line.
Mr. Fott, good evening. If we could probably keep your comments to 3 minutes, we're kind of running out of time, but I really appreciate your comments, sir. Thank you.
How you doing, Tim? How you doing, everybody?
Good evening.
Yeah, so I have a direct question then from Mr. Davis. You said that
You'll want to turn off your what you're watching.
I got it. Okay, yeah. So there seems to be some dispute about what Chief Segura said, but even if the least amount that he said was we need 2 paramedics up there, you acknowledge that, Mr. Davis, but yet it has been totally ignored. But the main reason I was calling in now was to find out what our new fire chief opinion is of the mayor's plan. What his opinion is. We got a new fire chief. So why don't we hear directly from him what his opinion is and what needs to be done? I mean, everybody wants to just sit here and talk to the council and talk to staff and talk to the mayor. But why don't we just ask the fire chief direct? That's what we pay him for. So I'd like to hear directly from the fire chief about that and what his opinion is about the level of safety that the firefighters and the citizens are working under right now in Laverne. So that's basically that one question. And if Mr. Davis would like to address that other question later on, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pott.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I have Terry Prentice on the line.
Mr. Prentice, good evening. Yeah, if we could keep it to 3 minutes, please. We're kind of crunching on time.
Yeah, good afternoon, council members and Mr. Rusty. Any proposal for such changes to be made without the input of our new fire chief would be unnecessarily counterproductive and premature. This appears to be a wish list of current departmental employees instead of an analysis of operational data to support such change to the operational model. Best business practices require that to change the fire department organizationally, we need the input of the person who will be responsible to the city manager and council in coming years, and that will be the new fire chief. Proceed with this type of change before the new fire chief has had the operational opportunity to fully analyze organizational needs is improved. The new fire chief will bring his own operational experiences from a different but similar background, and using those work-life experiences along with the analysis of the operational data is more likely to result in a better operational model proposal. This gives him the time to fully digest and analyze the challenges before him instead of making those decisions that may unnecessarily limit his and our success. Organizational structure is not something that should be decided with 1 or 2 council members meeting with current fire department personnel, especially when one of them, the interim fire chief, has already submitted his intention to resign. Changes such as recommended in this proposal need much more analysis and discussion as being physically prudent from an overall perspective. This appears to be an annual unfunded cost of an additional $1.5 million, which would deplete our reserve in approximately 6 years. We need to address reinstating the firefighters' paramedic premium pay before addressing any other issues. Let's put first things first. I appreciate that each of you will give this matter independent and thoughtful consideration before voting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prentice. JR, do we have anybody else?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have Joseph Gabaldon on the line. Go ahead.
Mr. Gabaldon, good evening. If you could keep it under 3 minutes, we'd appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight on this matter regarding the proposed spend for the fire department. I think that unfortunately, Councilman Davis was not afforded the fair platform for his comments, and probably would have not used the word reckless had he had the fair shot to speak in order. But given that the residents haven't been allowed to speak now, I'm sure there'll be different opinions based on the pressure. But as a businessman, I look at the motion to spend the money on the fire department based on improvement in safety. And while I believe in safety first, and I believe that the fire department is at the very top of that pyramid, I believe that the police department's also there. And from a sustainable business standpoint, I think that the city council as a whole has not done the work necessary to come up with a cohesive and unified plan. And I think that this plan is probably out of order, given the fact that it is a heartstrings pull on everybody's emotions regarding the fire department and what it means to the city. And I love the fire department and I love the fire staff. But what is tomorrow's problem that $1.5 million today, based on improved safety and at what measure that safety is actually quantifiable, helps the city with so many other issues? And with Measure LV, COVID affected, but in a positive way, as reported in the last city council meeting, that was supposed to help. But the reality is that from a financial standpoint, based on the budgetary spend, we're spending money everywhere, and the police department is just in an unsustainable position as the fire department. So when is the city council going to come up with that cohesive city plan that says we can pay all our bills without applying for $50 million pension bonds that the city pays $35 million back on over the course of 20 years, and these things not being crystal clear to the residents. So as a matter of just a business decision, I think that the city council, the mayor, everybody needs to go back to the drawing board, figure out what the long-term sustainable solution is, and avoid making an emotional decision based on perceived improvement to safety in the city based on one station that the city has been able to operate without for a number of months now. Thank you very much. Bye now.
Thank you, Mr. Gabaldon.
Mr. Mayor, I'm just refreshing my email. I believe that was the last caller.
Wait a minute. I just want to respond to a couple of the residents talking about a few people making decisions in the organization. These are the BCs. They run the fire department under the chief's guise. Multiple years of experience with fire crews, with fire, with paramedics. They all had a plan and they all agreed to it. And it was a very well thought out plan with dollars attached to it. This isn't reckless. This isn't just a crew of people that are just throwing something out there. These people have 20, 30 years experience, 40 years experience combined that know the fire service and have worked under multiple chiefs. So this plan is not something, this is following exactly what the Messina report says, but we have to put some funding in there. JR?
None others received, sir.
We'll close public comment and move to council comments. Mr. Crosby.
Yes, I'd like to actually read the Messina report. It says, if the city decides to continue with the LVFD, a comprehensive plan should be developed to address the current challenges, to include hiring a fire chief with the appropriate skill set and supporting the chief's efforts over the long term. Additionally, should the council decide to continue providing service through the LVFD, it would be beneficial for the city and the LVFD to engage in a detailed review of the entirety of its operations, as well as a community risk profile. This type of comprehensive review is contained in an SOC/CRA, and this comes with the associated costs based on the level of detail desired. That's what I believe that we need to do. We already have in our proposal, in our budget, to open up Station 3. It's just not staffed yet, but I know we have that in the budget. What we don't have in the budget is an extra fire apparatus up on Station 3. I know prior that Station 3 only had 3 to 5 medical calls a week. That's not a day, that's a week. With 80% of all calls, 80 to 85% of all calls being medical for the entire city. So what I think we need to propose is to make sure that we do the SOC to find out if it says we need it there, then definitely we need it there. Also, what was talked about with the meeting with the Verne Fire Association, that by doing this, it would make us have automatic aid with the county. That has not been confirmed as well. I want to make sure if we know $1.5 million makes us have automatic aid, then we know what the cost of that is, and making sure that we have that for that. Again, with many residents, and sorry, Ms. Gabaldon, if I don't say residents enough, but you are absolutely right that we need to look at our residents, and part of our protection is making sure that we're fiscally responsible as well. And by doing that, by the SOC, CRA, that's what will help to make sure that we get to the place that we need to be and make sure that we are covered and covered correctly for all of our fire, for all of our residents. So my proposal would be to make sure that we do the comprehensive review so that we know what we're doing and following the report for that. That's what the Messina says in its conclusion.
Councilmember Carter.
Yes, And it's funny you mentioned the Messina report, Rick, because I had pulled up the Messina report too when I heard this was possibly going to be discussed tonight. We as council, I want the public out there to know, we as council really didn't get much information on this. I think this was just put together and not, you know, I discussed to a point where we have information, all of us. But one thing I do know is we as resident citizens of Laverne paid for a Messina report. We paid for that services to happen. And on page 52, the very last page, table number 10, next steps. If we want to keep our Laverne Fire Department services, the very first thing is hire a fire chief. We as council do not dictate what departments do. Our responsibilities is to set rules and regulations. We listen, we talk to our department heads, but that is who we converse with. It is up to department heads to decide what is best for their department. So my belief is here, what we need to do is hire our fire chief. We have interviews Wednesday scheduled to hire the fire chief and move forward with the process. We are in the steps. That's the number one thing. When I met with the fire department, I did tell them, and everyone knows, I, along with 1,600 residents, wanted to keep our own fire department. So Tim, I'm very happy to see that you now realize we are going to keep our own fire department. With that, I told the fire department that yes, we will move forward with whatever we need. The money that we would spend on county over the next 5 to 15, 20 years, I would like to see put into our fire department. I want to see them grow, but I want the community residents to know that our fire department has all the equipment they need. We ask all the time, what do you need to have? And if they don't have the equipment, that's up to the battalion chiefs to let us know what they need. And that doesn't mean let us know, let their department head know to come to the city manager, who is our CEO, and get the proper equipment they need. It's not up to us to do this. A couple other statements. Fred was very correct. Fred Fault, he is very correct. The fire chief that is going to be hired, we have gone through 4 interim fire chiefs. And going back to even the first Summers as interim chief, he even said he was the one that wanted to close down the station number 3 because he said that we don't have the responses up here to warrant the services. But I know, living up here, the residents want that open. But it was built with the intention of forestry was up here at the time and paramedic services only. So I would make a proposal. Actually, I wrote one down, is I would like to ask Bob to, if we can look into it, is why don't we go back to hiring the paramedics that we need so that we can staff this, get what we need hired, put that in the budget. And then also in the Messina report, I also said, why don't we budget for the standard of coverage in a community risk assessment study that is recommended from the Messina report that says, how can we move forward as a group coming together unless we have these reports that's going to bring us together to set goals for the department. So that's what I see. I do want to remind everyone, reserves are meant for a one-time expense. Salaries, hiring new employees is an ongoing expense, and we cannot afford a 1.5 expense ongoing. So we need to turn this over to the new fire chief. Tim, your proposal could go to the new fire chief and what you have gotten from the staff, and let him assess what he feels he needs. But he needs to get on board. We move forward all together. We need to work together. But let's not forget, we have other departments with needs. Our police department is very quiet, but they need employees. They need still equipment. Luckily, we're getting new cars for them. And then our fire department's getting 3 new trucks. Other departments, community services. So let's reach out to all of them and, see what we can do. But right now, that's my proposal, is I would like to see us budget to get the paramedics hired and move forward with the risk assessment and the standard of coverage.
If I may just clarify, sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
The paramedics are budgeted. Those,
Okay.
we just haven't been able to fill them. We've been in a constant state of recruitment, trying to fill those remaining 2 spots so we can reopen Station 3 for paramedic service.
Good.
So they're in the budget and they're in next year's budget too.
Councilmember Carter, Lau, sorry.
No worries, we look alike. Just kidding. Trying to bring some levity, folks. But I did want to echo what Councilmember Crosby intimated with his comments previously. And I think that, you know, this has been going on for some time, but I thought we were all on the same page with respect to the necessity for the appropriate data so that we can move forward in a meaningful and thoughtful way. Because we can all sit here and conjecture about what we think is necessary, what we think will serve our residents to ensure their safety, ensure all of our safety, and to make sure that that we're running as smoothly as possible. But that's based on conjecture. And that's why the Messina report, as Councilmember Crosby indicated, says that you do need to do an SOC and you do need to do a CRA, because not every city is the same. Not all the needs of every city are the same. And that's why that's going to be unique to us to say what is really and truly necessary. And if it is that, hey, you need to open Station 3 and we have to have fire and paramedics, then we move forward on that and we come up with a sustainable plan together for how that's going to be accomplished. Because I'm concerned, much like you know, has been mentioned by some of our residents on this meeting, is that how are we going to fund this in the long term? Because it can't be a Band-Aid. You know, if we take funds from X amount, you know, can we even use those funds to take care of this? You know, to Councilwoman Robin Carter's point, you don't use reserves for operating costs, for ongoing costs. That's a one-time expense. So what are we doing to plan for what that long-term looks like? If we're going to really truly think about the perpetuity of the city and the success of the city in the long run, then we need to operate on facts. I think Mr. Gabaldon said it accurately. We need to take the emotion out of this and let's look at the facts. It's really easy to pull on heartstrings, but the harder thing is going to be, how do we make the hard decisions about where our money is going to be allocated, since we don't have a money tree, and how we're going to make it sustainable so that this is and continues to be a safe and good place for all of us to live. So I think we need to go back to basics and say, first things first. Let's do the SOC, let's do the CRA, let's engage the input of the current chief to say what is possible and what is successful. We can't just throw things out there and hope that they're going to work without getting the input necessary and the actual facts and data and numbers necessary to move forward.
Thank you, Councilmember Lau. Councilmember Davis.
Thank you, Mayor. I think that many of our residents were hitting it right on the head, and I concur with my council members. We have the budget for the 2 paramedics, and I want to make sure we get those as quickly as we can. That's been a challenge. So to throw additional pieces on top of that is the reason, and the sensitivity with our entire community, because this has gone on for as many years as it has and is a very sensitive subject. That's why I use the term and will continue to I believe that your behavior tonight has been reckless, Mayor. I think we could address this in a much more emotionless and a much more thoughtful way. And so I support both Councilmember Crosby and Councilmember Carter's proposal to allocate the funds necessary for a SOC CRA assessment and see what that tells us. Because as you said in one of your minutes with the mayor, number 1 thing is funding, and we'll have to figure out how to fund that. The number 2 thing was hire a chief, and with that chief and the SOC, we can determine what it is that we actually need.
Thank you, Councilmember Davis. You keep using reckless. I'm just going to say it. This has been 4 years of basically a rough road for all of us, and some of us even more so. We're going to put back a role model station with 2 paramedics, an ambulance, 2 paramedic ambulances, the same situation we had before, which is not a good model. It's not a good model for supervision. If we don't put the pride back in this fire department now, this is going to be a major issue. Those 2 people that I'm asking for staffing this, which is 13, and even using reserves, it's not reckless. It's riding a ship that's been wrong for many, many years. This has been designed by an ex-fire chief, 3 battalion chiefs, and the association. This is the plan that will work. Yes, we need a new fire chief, but talking to other fire chiefs, this gives them the tools to start. This is a temporary measure for a year, but we can find some sustainable funding. This is very important to our city for safety. It's not just spending dollars frivolously and reckless. This has been going on for way too long. We need to staff that fire station with an engine and a full crew. That'll give us full ALS capability plus an ambulance throughout the city. Forget about the fires. Paramedic calls is one of our bases. This gets us closest to NFPA standards, which is a total of 17, which we probably won't get to, but 13 gets us closer. It puts the pride back in our employees to know that we care about them. This is for internal advancement. This is also for people to come into our community knowing that our fire department is going to stick. We're not assured we're going to get a fire chief. We've got an interim for a few months. We're not assured we're going to have a fire chief. This is not reckless. I've been putting up with this for a long time. We have management. We have management issues with the fire department as far as our city manager. And these are things that lay heavily on our fire department. We need to solve this and move forward. I'm quite frankly tired of talking about it. This is where the rubber hits the road. We either fund this right now with reserves or use it from other funding. And yes, I do care about every resident. And the only reason I care about every resident is because I want them to be safe. But also if our employees aren't safe, our residents aren't safe. This is a matter of rebuilding and giving the new chief the tools ahead of time. We'll do the standards of coverage. Yes, they're important. We can do that when he gets on board. This method I'm talking about is going to take a few months to even put together if you guys approve this tonight, because you have to notify all your agencies that you're bringing another fire station on. This is very important. This is not a fly by night. This is not reckless. This is not something I just thought up. I've discussed this at length. I'm sorry, guys. This is something that's very important to me, and it's very important for our employee group. And yes, all our other employees too. I care about every single one of them.
So I would just pose this question, and I'm not trying, and I think I'm just going to leave it at that because we are getting close to the start of our council meeting. But understanding that what I've just heard is that we have had problems, ongoing problems with recruiting paramedics in the first place. And that's already budgeted for. That actually has.
Already have that, yes.
That we already have money for that.
No.
And so to what extent, and I'm not looking for an answer, I just want everybody to mull this over. To what extent do we believe that if we are saying to folks, we're going to do a one-time expenditure to staff up this fire station, but we don't have a plan in place for what's going to happen in year 2 because we don't know where that money is coming from. How do you actually believe that that actually helps our recruitment efforts? Because when I go looking for a job, I'm not looking for a job for 1 year. I'm looking for someplace that I can stay for a while. And so that's why I'm not saying that that's not a possibility. Again, I'd like to see the SOC and the CRA first to determine whether or not that's where the funds should go, because I think no matter what, we are spending money and we need to make sure that what we're doing is appropriate for this city because we are unique, and its residents because we are unique from other residents in other places, but also that we have a sustainable plan so that when we are out recruiting for folks to fill these positions, they're not thinking, gosh, I don't know if I want to go there because I don't know if that's a viable position that will remain open for me in the year to come. And I don't want to go through the recruitment process again to find another place to work. So those are the things that I think of top of mind as I'm thinking big picture about how we need to move this forward together. So you could be right. Maybe that's what needs to happen at Station 3. But again, I want to see what the data is. I want to see what the SOC says. I want to see what the CRA says. So.
You're talking about 2 individuals, and we can work on that. That's what our staff is for, is to work on a sustainable source. We have a fire department that needs to be operating correctly, not constantly. We're going to lose more people and continually lose more people until we put something in place, whether it's temporary for this year, we fund it. The next year, if we have to, we go to reserves too. That's what reserves are for. They're for to fund things that need to be saved, especially our employee group, especially our fire department. It needs to be done. I'm sorry.
Well, Mr. Rusty, what do you need for direction from us?
I just need to know what the desire is, the council. I have 2 approaches. I have the mayor's idea of the staffing, and I will clarify, it's not just 2 people, that's 6 people in total because you have 3 shifts that you need to fill. So that's why if people are thinking $1.2 million for 2 people, it's actually 6 that we would be standing up. So there's that option, Or then I've also heard the approach that you and Mayor Pro Tem Davis and Councilmember Crosby put out there to pursue the SOC. So it's either of those or neither of those, or both, I guess.
Well, do you need it in
Just
a
general
motion?
direction as to how I should finish putting the budget together.
Do you want it in a motion or just direction from?
Just general, I mean, what I'm hearing here is that moving forward with the SOC has general support. And so I will plan to do that unless I'm incorrect in what I'm hearing.
Well, I'm going to make my request that we fund it now with reserve funds and also other funds for this year and work on a sustainable source. That is my request. So we either say yes or no, and then you move to the other one.
No, I cannot support that.
I cannot support your motion, your plan.
Councilmember Lau,
I can't support that.
Councilmember Crosby,
I support looking at it for a plan from SOC first.
so my plan,
That's my preference as well, is that we go.
And hiring a fire chief, like the Messina report says, yes.
okay. I support my original method, so there's 4-1.
Okay. Any more comment or discussion?
I don't think so. Anybody else have any more comments?
Nope.
So we will continue to, we'll go back, put the books together based on everything you've seen tonight, plus the changes that were just, the change that was just suggested. And you'll have them in the next couple of weeks, and then we will get them out to the public, get the electronic version out to the community shortly after we get them to the council. What we are going to do, I know we're at 6:27 right now. We are emailing all the attendees of the next meeting and let them know we're going to be delayed a couple minutes, and then we're going to put something up on the live stream, just so people aren't waiting there wondering on a black screen. So we'll take about 5 minutes or so, and then switch over to the other meeting.
Okay.
If council will note, I'm going to start the meeting, so it will be live when you come back. You'll just have to call it to order, but just so you know, you will be live once you come back into that separate meeting.
So if you could mute yourselves and turn off your screen.
My last comment, Mr. Russi, is that I'm disappointed. And I think that we took money over safety. I'm very disappointed. Thank you. We close the meeting at 6:28.